Well, welcome to season 1, episode 4.
We are talking all about overthrowing fear in multiracial ministry this season. And in particular, this episode, we're going to dial in the cultural practice of being willing to fail.
Yes.
You sound so excited. Everybody likes to talk about failure.
Right. Right.
Almost guaranteed when you look at the metrics of this episode, it is going to be the least listened to episode
I guarantee
of the podcast. Yeah. People are like, no. I don't need that. I don't need to be willing to fail.
Yeah.
You do.
You do.
You do. You need it. You need to be willing to fail for multiracial ministry. And Pastor B, would you tell us why, what shape this being willing to fail takes when it comes to being a cultural practice of a ministry or a church?
Yes, sure. We courageously experiment with new ideas.
Mm-hmm.
We are willing to fail. We know creativity is stifled by fear.
Yeah.
And leading the church well is creative work. And we know that in the end, we'll either have a win or we'll have a story.
Yep, that's exactly right. This mindset of being willing to fail helps us see, like, hey, we're coming out of this either with a win or with a story. So it's a win-win.
Yeah.
Either way.
Yeah.
But part of the practice is, as you mentioned at the beginning of that, courageously experimenting.
Yeah.
With new ideas.
Yep.
Why is that a core practice for a multiracial ministry in particular?
It is a core practice in multiracial ministry in particular because you are going to fail. not once, not twice, not even 3 times, but over and over and over. And that's not to discourage anybody.
Yeah, Jesus said 70 times 7. Never.
That's not to discourage you, but it's to get you into practice of being courageous in your ideas.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're going to fail over and over and over anyway, why not be willing to?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's in multiracial ministry in particular, it's normal.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. It's normal to fail because there are so many different types of folks. There are so many different cultures at play. There's so many different perspectives. There are so many different layers of willingness to do or not do different things. Not everything is going to work.
Listen, anytime you're mixing races, anytime you're mixing ethnicities, cultures, look, you could expect it.
Yeah.
You can expect it.
Absolutely.
Things will not go perfect as planned.
So if you're out there right now and you're like, I'm failing at just about everything in my multiracial ministry, like, welcome.
Yeah.
We're so glad you joined the party because we feel like we've just been doing that over and over for many years.
Well, but we said we either have a win or we have a story.
That's right. Yeah.
And I believe that sometimes the stories are better than the wins.
Yeah, that's true. Say more though about why you think that.
Because from stories, we learn what not to do the next time.
Yeah.
Stories we could use to encourage somebody who has failed.
Yeah.
And with stories, you get to share your experience in dealing with a particular problem with someone else that may help them along the way. So I think at times stories are better than the wins.
Yeah, that's right.
Because honestly, how often do we share a good experience over a bad experience?
Right. Well, and with the good experiences, what do you learn?
Right.
What do you how many of us have come away from really knocking it out of the park and going oh, I learned so much from my success?
Right. Nobody.
Yeah. There's wisdom in the stories.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason why we keep trying new things, because there's so much wisdom to be gleaned from the failures.
Yeah.
And it's when we first started, let's just share a little bit about one of our
Bible study. I know you're going to talk about it.
Yeah.
Bible study.
Over and over and over again. We had a particular challenge with midweek gatherings.
Yep.
How do we get our people, we talked about it in the last episode, how do we get our people into each other's lives on a regular basis? So this is not just an aesthetic diversity thing. This is a uniting thing. And, Black folks and white folks and folks from other different racial backgrounds have different church ways.
Yeah.
And different ways of getting together midweek.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, for my white people out there, you might not know that not every church in the world does small groups.
Right.
It might surprise you, but that is not the only way.
For us, if you're doing a midweek Bible study on Wednesday,
you're
knocking it out of the park.
At the church. The pastor's leading it.
Oh, yeah.
It's basically a second service.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
I mean, so there are very legitimate different ways to meet. I mean, if you're in a Korean church, you might meet every morning at 5 a.m. for prayer service.
Yeah.
Right? There are totally different, legitimate ways, wonderful ways to meet midweek as a church. We were dealing at that time when we first started with a mostly Black and mostly white congregation.
Yep.
And we were struggling to figure out how do we get these people together. So we started by setting the bar super low, right? Tell a little bit about the dinner parties. What did we do at dinner parties?
So we used to have these dinner parties, and I feel kind of bad for saying it because we used to try to strategically engineer them.
Yeah.
And where we had certain people meeting certain, and that just like failed miserably.
Yeah. So it's going to bring their greens. Man, and we would have like a different 4 people, right, at every dinner party. And they would always be like, "Oh, this was so lovely," and then just not come back, right? Man. So it was like once a month. It was super low barrier of entry, right?
And not to mention that we like surveyed our community, and people was just like, "I want connection."
Right. And who doesn't like food?
Right. Right.
It's like the one thing that seems to be true. Multiracial,
right? In every culture,
and everybody likes food, right? Turns out that's not true,
right?
I mean, at least it wasn't in our context.
Right.
We had tried these dinner parties, and then we surveyed the whole church. We're trying to figure out what is it that people really want, and we got back that people want a Bible study, and we were like kind of surprised. It's not like very avant-garde church planty stuff, but like, yeah, that's kind of our wheelhouse. Let's do a Bible study. So I remember the very first one that we had at the house that we live in now, but it was like before we were able to remodel it. And this was like the ceiling was falling in, and we had like a donated couch from a friend, and there were a bunch of people there. Like our living room was packed out. And it was a pretty diverse group.
Yeah, it was.
It was a pretty diverse group.
I give us points for that.
Yeah, except no men there. It wasn't gender diverse.
Right.
So there's that.
Yeah.
But besides that, it was very diverse. I remember we started going around and asking folks to read, one verse at a time of the scripture that we were going to be reading, right?
Yep.
And you remember what happened next?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
How could you forget?
A seizure out of the blue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody is past the Bible, and they're about to read the gospel portion of the scripture, hit the ground.
Yep.
Start seizing the whole group.
And I remember in particular, 3 women were working with her, and the rest of the group was praying.
Yeah.
And thank God those 3 just happened to be nurses.
They happened to be nurses. It was they'd just come for the first time the Sunday before.
Right.
They showed up to the Bible study.
Right.
It was the only time they showed up to the Bible study. But yeah, the nurses just taking care of her until the ambulance got there. We pulled a couple other people aside to pray for her. It was wild. It was wild. And then after that, we were just like, well,
the
Bible study's over. It was not necessarily the way you want to start.
Right.
And then after that, we just had like a different 3 people
every
single time.
Every time.
Right. So people would come to one and they wouldn't come back the next week, and they'd come back 3 weeks later and they'd be like, oh man, but I didn't see so-and-so and so-and-so because people aren't coming consistently. So we tried dinner parties, we tried a formal Bible study. And finally, when we started getting deeper with people into why they weren't making that a priority, we realized Oh, it's because there isn't real connection with folks, and they're not willing to commit to the connection,
right?
Because they're not confident that other people will commit to
it.
So we had to create, going back to our systems and structures episode, we had to create a system and a structure where we actually mutually committed to each other for a season. And that's where we started Connect Groups. That took us, what, a year?
A year
just to figure out a structure that would work for meeting in the midweek, where it's like in a homogenous church, you kind of given to you maybe, like everybody just expects a certain thing and everybody dives in because it's their cultural way.
And then it was the year and a half on Zoom.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I will say those Connect Groups served in keeping the majority of our people together during that pandemic time.
Yeah.
And I would say that really through Zoom is where people really started connecting with each other.
Yeah, that's right. And so we learned a lot through that experience because we failed over and over.
Exactly.
I think one of the things we learned is that like people that come to our church, a multiracial community, people, everyone from like recently homeless or returning from, being in prison, all the way to like executive level people at a law firm or Google or whatever, like they don't come for a low barrier of entry.
Right.
They come because they're committed to this crazy vision of the kingdom of God. And so we learn like, oh, we need to meet people where they're at and call people to a commitment.
I would tell you, I want to share with you. You already know it.
I'm here.
Yeah. So but what seemed like a huge failure, they gave us a good story.
Okay.
And that is when we were when we were talking about merging churches, we were looking for somebody who had did the same thing or something remotely close to what we were attempting to do.
Yeah.
And I remember we had these friends that merged a white and a Korean church. Mm-hmm. And I remember specifically one of them telling us, don't be surprised if a year from now you won't have 80 people that started with you.
80%
of the people that started with you.
Yeah, I remember that.
And when he said it, I'm just like, yeah, right. I'm just 80? Nah, not us. 25 I'll give you, but 80? Yeah. And I remember specifically the Sunday you turned to me and you said, man, do you realize it's only a few people from Oakland Communion here left? And then I'm just like, nah. And then I counted, and then so that made me count the people that came with me. And I'm just like, where did they go?
Yeah.
Where did they go?
Yeah. So a year in, we ran the numbers.
Yeah.
And 80% of the people who started
right.
with us were gone. And we had, thankfully, there were people who came.
Right.
And we were about even for the year,
right.
But still, 80% attrition. So this is not church growth strategy.
No, not at all.
We don't know how to do that.
Not at all. not at all.
But it is, the people who did come came for the commitment. Came for what it is.
I believe they get the vision.
Yeah.
They get what we're trying to do, and they're all in.
That's right.
They're all in.
Yeah. So one of the reasons that in multiracial ministry we've got to be willing to fail is that the principles for building community, for leading ministries and churches, for the most part, have been written and taught from monoracial or monocultural perspectives or organizations or seminaries or Bible schools, right? Most of our ways of building community have come from homogenous points of view.
Oh yeah.
And that means that in multiracial ministry,
nobody put out a book on how to lead a multiracial Bible study.
Yeah, well, if they have, we haven't read it.
Right.
And basically, there were no books about multiracial ministry, multi-ethnic ministry, maybe, but except for like 20 years ago, maybe.
Yep.
This is when it kind of started. So, in the whole history of the church, like 2,000 years, that's like 1/10 of 1% of the years.
Yep.
So we're basically starting from scratch.
Starting from scratch.
Which means we got to be willing to mix different ingredients.
Yep.
And figure out how to do it by trying and failing.
I mean, the cake may flop, but at least you made a cake.
That's right. And you learned just how much flour not to put in.
Right, to put not to put in.
Yeah. I mean, any time we mix different races, different ethnicities, as you said, we should be expecting to fail at least half the time.
Yeah.
So give us an example. I mean, this seems like it could be a principle that we just like adapted from like entrepreneurial podcasts about failing fast, and breaking things on our way through to success. That's not where we're getting it from. It's not what we're talking about. Can you talk a little bit about the biblical grounding for this mindset of being willing to go into something that God is calling you to do, even if you know you're likely to fail?
Yeah. Well, I think of Jeremiah.
Mm-hmm.
God called him and said, "They're not going to listen to you."
Yeah.
But I'm calling you anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, if that's not a recipe for failure, I mean, God himself told, they're not going to listen to you.
Yeah.
But I'm calling you anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
He knew in the beginning that he was walking into failing.
Put that on your perspective.
Right.
Your church planting prospectus, God said I should do it, but I'm not going to succeed.
Right.
Would you donate to this ministry?
But like, and you said something that sparked a thought. And just like, it's more important what God is calling you to.
Yeah.
Not the measure of success you think it ought to be.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So, I mean, even the title, even the topic that we're talking about right now, it's a little provocative in the sense of we have to take a step back and say, what does failure mean?
Right.
What does failure mean?
Right.
And failure in a ministry context, we've been talking about it from the standpoint of like what you're trying is not really going to work the way you think it will. Right. But ultimately, what it really means is not following God's lead.
Yeah.
Not obeying him when he says to move.
Yeah.
Not obeying him when he says to start. Not obeying him when he says to stop. That's real failure.
Yeah.
And in that respect, you can succeed all day long in multiracial ministry.
Yep.
One of the things we tried a while back was to try and meet our Spanish-speaking neighbors where they were at.
Well, we went all out.
We did.
We went all out.
We're a mostly black, mostly white church.
Yeah.
And we were like, maybe God is calling us. We think God is calling us to reach out to our neighbors who are Spanish-speaking. And of course, we can't do that unless there's Spanish involved.
Right.
So I will say, while I was out on paternity leave, a decision was made that I fully support.
Well, before we get there, we got to mention the translators, the translating system that we purchased.
Oh yeah! Oh my gosh! Well, that was partway through the process.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I'm remembering correctly, there was a decision that we're going to go to fully bilingual services.
Yep.
And in line with our philosophy of ministry, we don't want anybody to feel like second-class citizens. Right. So we're not going to do normally on Sunday to Sunday basis a headset thing where somebody in the back translating. Not that that's wrong for every context or anything like that, but for us, it felt like that would be sending a message to Spanish speakers that this is not your house. You're just guests here.
Yep.
So we did fully consecutive translation, and several people told us, don't do it. It's not going to work. It's just not.
Well, and not to mention that, so we started out doing it line by line.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
We started out doing it line by line, and we quickly were told that does not work.
That was whiplash.
Yeah.
That was whiplash.
Yeah.
So we started doing it like paragraph by paragraph or thought for thought,
right?
Which worked a little better, except that it still didn't work. It still was exhausting for the people who were part of it.
Not to mention during the Spanish translation, the English speakers would be asleep.
Right. And vice versa.
Right.
Like it wasn't working for Spanish speakers either.
No.
So, we got to a point where we realized about 6 months in that this isn't working.
Right.
Like, it's not serving our English speakers. It's not serving the Spanish speakers that are coming to visit because they're intrigued that there's a space for them, and they realize, this is too hard. This is really too hard. And we had to be willing to pull the plug and to name it as a failure of a sort. Not a failure from the standpoint of we followed God's lead to do what we thought was consistent with his Spirit's leading. And there were some other things that followed on that we could talk about in another episode. But I think it's important to name when something isn't working, when something is, and be willing to move on. Be willing to, I think it's Pete Scazzaro in Emotionally Healthy Leadership. He talks about the importance of like necessary endings. Like there are just some things in ministry that just have to die.
Oh yeah.
And it's always hard, but it's really important. And unless we're coming into it with an experimental mindset and a willingness to fail, we're not going to let it die.
I remember when Florida State was moving on from his historic coach, and he was old, and I remember the athletic director said what needs to happen eventually should happen immediately.
Yeah.
If Bobby Bowden was out of there. But I remember him saying that, and I looked up that quote. He didn't actually make it up. He got it from somewhere else. But I remember him saying what should happen eventually needs to happen immediately.
Yeah. So a willingness to fail really actually puts us in a place where we are also willing to lead change.
Yeah.
Right?
Definitely that.
We're also willing to lead change.
Definitely that.
And usually by the time we leaders are like naming a failure that we have been a part of creating, our people already know.
You want to say that a little bit?
Our people already know, like they're experiencing it. They're sitting there wondering, man, how long are we going to do this? Like, this is nuts. So it's important for us as leaders, as facilitators of ministries and churches, to be able to name failure when it happens.
Yeah.
And we can do that because we're not defined by it.
Yeah. And you'll either have a win or you'll have a story.
Okay, so one resource. I'm the resident recommender.
Yes.
So one resource that I want to recommend is one of our favorite people in the world.
On the planet,
Nikki Lerner.
Yes.
Nikki has a podcast called Culture Coach. And on that podcast, listen to everything she does because she's brilliant and very wise and has a lot more experience in this area than we do, frankly.
Yep.
One of the things that, one of the episodes that Nikki has that talks a bit about this is called 5 Challenges for Multicultural Leaders. You have to scroll back a little bit because she is prodigious with her podcasting. She's got a lot of episodes. But if you look up 5 Challenges for Multicultural Leaders, she talks about fighting perfectionism in your cross-cultural relationships and in your leadership.
Yeah.
And it's really worth a listen. So we want to encourage you, Nikki Lerner, Culture Coach, 5 Challenges for Multicultural Leaders, and everything else that she does is really worth you checking out if you want to grow in your leadership.
Well, in the future, we're planning to have her on this show, so...
that's a call out to you right now, Nikki.
Yeah.
In case you're listening, we would love to have you on the show. All right. Anytime. So friends, thank you for joining us today. We always want to ask you to like, subscribe, share if you have enjoyed this journey with us.
Yes.
If you've gotten anything out of this, subscribe and share the podcast. It's the way that our community can keep growing and the way that this model of multiracial ministry can continue to make an impact in the world that God loves. So
you can go to multiracial ministry.com.
Multiracialministry.com.
And you can find us there.
Yep.
You can find us on all podcast platforms.
Yep. And even some of the social stuff.
Yeah.
Some of it.
Yeah.
We had a whole debate about this, but some of it. Anyway, friends, thank you for joining us today for Multiracial Ministry Mindset, and we will see you next time when we will be talking about
apologizing quickly and fully.
All right. See you next time.
Bye.